You're replaceable. The service department at Preston Auto Group fell silent. 23 mechanics stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the weekly meeting to end so they could get back to work. Instead, 31-year-old General Manager Chad Preston slowly raised a performance report. His eyes stopped on one name, Ray Coleman. The 52-year-old mechanic looked up without saying a word. Your diagnostic times are the slowest in this department. Several technicians exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew Ray. For 15 years he had been the man customers trusted most. The man who trained half the mechanics standing in that room. The man who never cut corners. Chad smiled. Honestly, don't understand why we're paying you this much. Room became painfully quiet. At your age, you should be a lot easier to replace. A young mechanic laughed. The laugh lasted only a second. Nobody else joined him. Ray looked directly into Chad's eyes. There was no anger, no fear, only disappointment. If my work isn't good enough, work harder. Chad shook his head. You still don't get it. This company doesn't reward loyalty, rewards results. Right now, you're just another old mechanic slowing everyone else down. Those words echoed through the shop. Ray quietly picked up his toolbox and walked back to his service bay. No one followed him. No one defended him, not because they didn't respect him, but because they were afraid. Every person in that building knew Chad Preston could destroy a career with one signature. None of them knew the real reason Ray's repair times were slower. Whenever an elderly customer came into the shop, whenever a single mother depended on her only car, whenever someone clearly couldn't afford an unnecessary repair, Ray checked every diagnosis again, and then one more time. He would rather lose 20 minutes than steal $1 from an honest family. Those extra minutes never appeared on Chad's spreadsheets. Integrity never does. That evening Ray drove home in his old pickup truck. His wife Diane opened the front door before he even reached it. She looked at his face. What happened? Nothing. She smiled sadly. Ray, you've never been able to lie to me. He sat down at the kitchen table for several long seconds. He couldn't speak. Finally he whispered, he called me replaceable. Diane walked over without saying a word. She placed her hand over his. They don't deserve you. Stared at the floor. Maybe he's right. No, they are looking at your paycheck. I'm looking at the man I married. Later that night, long after the neighborhood had gone to sleep, Ray walked into the old garage behind his house. He switched on a single light. A beautiful 1969 Ford Mustang stood beneath a gray cover, half restored, every bolt polished by hand, every panel perfectly aligned. Every detail crafted with patience most people no longer understood. For 12 years, after finishing exhausting shifts at Preston Auto Group, Ray had spent almost every night inside this garage, quietly building something no one knew existed. Not Chad, not his co-workers, not even his closest friends. Across town, Chad Preston poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey. He smiled as he looked over the company's performance reports. He believed he had just put an old mechanic in his place. What he didn't know was that the man he had humiliated in front of everyone was already building a future that would one day put the entire Preston family business into his own hands. The secret garage. The next morning, Ray arrived at Preston Auto Group 30 minutes before anyone else. He always did. The shop was silent. He unlocked his toolbox, poured himself a cup of black coffee, and quietly began working on the first vehicle of the day. At exactly 8 o'clock, the service doors opened, customers started arriving. An elderly woman slowly walked toward the front desk. She looked worried. My car is making a strange noise, she said. I don't have much money, but I need it to get to my doctor's appointments. The service advisor looked around the shop. Ray, can you take this one? Of course. 20 minutes later. Ray already knew the problem. A loose heat shield, a repair that would take less than 10 minutes. Another mechanic could have easily turned it into a $2,000 repair. Nobody would have questioned it. The woman didn't understand cars. She would have believed anything instead. Ray tightened 2 bolts, test drove the vehicle, checked everything twice, then walked back into the waiting room. Good news, car is perfectly safe. She looked confused. That's it, Ray smiled. That's it. Tears filled her eyes. Been saving money all month because I thought the engine was ruined. Ray handed her the keys. Use that money for yourself. She slowly drove away. A young mechanic watched the entire conversation. Why didn't you sell her the suspension repair? Ray looked at him. Because she didn't need one. The dealership would have made thousands. Ray closed his toolbox. If I have to lie to make money, already failed. Young mechanic never forgot those words that afternoon. Chad Preston walked through the shop carrying another stack of reports. He stopped beside Ray. I heard you finished the Johnson vehicle. Yes, how much did you bill? The minimum inspection charge. Chad frowned. That's all. She didn't need anything else. Chad laughed. Do you know what your problem is? Ray remained silent. You think you're running a charity. This is a business. Without another word, Chad walked away. Ray quietly returned to work. Across the room, several mechanics watched him. One of them, don't know how he stays so calm, answered, because he's a better man than the rest of us. That night, the lights inside the small garage behind Ray's house came on once again, but this time, a black luxury SUV slowly stopped across the street. Someone inside watched the garage for several minutes, then drove away without saying a word. Ray never noticed, but someone had just discovered his biggest secret, the man they chose to sacrifice. 6 months passed, nothing changed. Every Monday, another meeting, another performance report, another reminder that Chad Preston believed numbers mattered more than people. Ray never argued. He simply kept doing his job. One rainy Thursday afternoon, a black luxury SUV rolled into the service bay. The owner stepped out. Everyone recognized him. Richard Hayes, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. Chad rushed over with a smile. "Mr. Hayes will take excellent care of you." SUV needed new brakes, a routine repair. Kyle Bennett, the dealership's newest mechanic, was assigned to the job, only 24 years old. Eager to impress, desperate to prove himself, Chad stood beside him. "Need this finished in under an hour." Kyle looked nervous. "That's pretty fast." "I didn't ask for excuses. I asked for results." Across the shop, Ray overheard every word. He quietly walked over. "Kyle, take your time. Brakes are one job you never rush." Before Kyle could answer, Chad interrupted. "Ray, go back to your own work. We're not paying you to slow everyone else down." Ray looked at Kyle one last time, check everything twice. Then he walked away. An hour later, the SUV left the dealership. Kyle watched it disappear through the service doors. Something didn't feel right. Late that evening, Ray was already home when his phone rang. One of the mechanics was almost shouting, "Ray, Mr. Hayes was in an accident." Ray stood up immediately. "Is he alive?" "Yes, the brakes failed." The next morning, every employee was ordered into the meeting room. Nobody spoke. Chad entered carrying a folder. His expression was colder than ever. He slowly placed the papers on the table. "Completed the investigation." Ray frowned. "Investigation already?" Chad looked directly at him. "Final safety inspection. Signed by Ray Coleman." The room froze. Ray stared at the document. "That's impossible. Never signed that inspection." Chad folded his arms. "So you're calling these records fake?" Ray picked up the paper. His name was there, his employee number, his electronic signature. Someone had forged everything. Ray looked around the room. Kyle couldn't even raise his head. His hands were shaking. Ray understood immediately. The wrong man had made the mistake, but the right man had been chosen to take the blame. Chad took one step forward. "Effective immediately. Your employment at Preston Auto Group is terminated." 15 years gone in less than 30 seconds. As security escorted Ray toward the exit, every mechanic stood in complete silence. No one moved, no one spoke, only Kyle. He watched Ray walk away, with tears in his eyes, because he knew a man losing everything was completely innocent. The hardest year, the rain poured down as Ray carried the last box from his locker. 15 years of his life fit inside one cardboard box. A few family photos, a coffee mug, old work gloves, certificates no one cared about anymore. As he reached his pickup truck, someone called his name. He turned around. It was Kyle. The young mechanic could barely look him in the eyes. "I'm sorry," gave him a tired smile. "You didn't fire me." Kyle opened his mouth, but no words came out. He knew the truth, and the guilt was already destroying him. Ray climbed into his truck and drove away. He never looked back. The following Monday, Ray walked into another dealership carrying his resume. The service manager looked impressed. 15 years at Preston Auto Group. "That's right." Manager smiled until he reached the last page. His expression changed. "You were terminated for gross negligence involving a brake failure." Ray took a deep breath. "It wasn't my fault." Manager slowly closed the folder. "I'm sorry. My insurance company would never allow me to hire you." 5 minutes later, Ray was back in the parking lot. Rejected. The second dealership lasted 3 minutes. The third didn't even interview him. His reputation had arrived before he did. Weeks turned into months. Their savings began to disappear. One evening, Diane quietly placed a stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen table. Mortgage, electricity, insurance, medical expenses. Ray stared at them in silence. "I failed you." Diane immediately shook her head. "No, you were betrayed. Those are two very different things." Ray looked at the old garage outside the window. "Spent 12 years restoring classic cars." "It's only a hobby." Diane smiled. "No, it stopped being a hobby years ago. You've just been too humble to admit it." She opened a drawer and placed several folders in front of him. Every restoration, every customer, every sale, every profit for 12 years. She had secretly organized every record. "Ray, do you know what this is?" He looked confused. "Future." The first time since losing his job, Ray felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. That night, he walked into the garage. He slowly pulled the cover off the unfinished Mustang, ran his hand across the polished fender, and whispered, "Maybe this isn't the end." He had no idea that somewhere across town, Chad Preston was standing in his office, laughing with his managers. "That old mechanic is finished. Never recover from this," Chad truly believed. He had destroyed Ray Coleman's life forever. He couldn't have been more wrong. The last chance. The next morning, Ray woke up before sunrise for the first time in 15 years. He had nowhere to go, no uniform, no service bay, no customers waiting, only silence. He walked into the garage behind his house. The unfinished 1969 Mustang stood exactly where he had left it. For several minutes, he simply stared at it. Then Diane walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one. "Been thinking." Ray smiled weakly. "That's usually dangerous." She laughed. "No, it's necessary." She placed a folder on the workbench. Inside were 12 years of receipts, customer letters, photos, and financial records. Ray looked confused. You kept all of this? Every single page. She pointed at the numbers. Do you know how many cars you've restored? Ray shrugged. I stopped counting. 43. She turned another page. Do you know how many customers came back a second time? He shook his head. 94%. Another page. Do you know how many people asked if you could restore another car? Hundreds. She smiled. You don't have a hobby, you own a business. Looked around the tiny garage. This, she nodded. This, he laughed quietly. No bank would ever take us seriously. Sound of an engine interrupted them. A classic red 1967 Camaro slowly pulled into the driveway. An elderly man stepped out. Mr. Coleman, Ray nodded. My name is Harold. I bought the Mustang you restored 3 years ago. Ray smiled. I remember. Harold looked around the garage. Been searching everywhere for you. He uncovered an old 1968 Chevrolet Chevelle on a trailer. It belonged to my brother. Passed away last winter. I don't want a restoration. I want you. Only you. Bring it back to life. Ray stood speechless. Harold pulled out an envelope. Inside was a deposit check large enough to cover 3 months of mortgage payments. Been waiting almost a year until you had time. Wait another year if I have to. I won't trust anyone else. Ray slowly looked at Diane. She smiled through tears without saying a word. She whispered, I told you. That evening, Ray accepted the project. He had no idea that Harold wasn't just another customer. He was one of the most respected classic car collectors in the entire state. And once he told his friends, Ray Coleman's life would never be the same again. The collector's phone call 3 weeks later. Ray was still working in the small garage behind his house. Every morning, coffee, tools, silence. Every night, another few hours of careful work on Harold's Chevelle. He wasn't trying to become rich, he was simply trying to survive. One afternoon, his phone rang. Ray Coleman. Yes, my name is Michael Turner. Harold gave me your number. Ray smiled. How can I help you? I heard you're the mechanic who restores cars exactly the way they left the factory. I do my best. Michael laughed. Harold said you'd say something humble like that. I have a 1970 Dodge Challenger. It belonged to my father. Been searching for the right person for 4 years. I think I finally found him. Before Ray could answer, another call came in, then another and another. Within 2 weeks, every weekend for the next 8 months was completely booked. Diane looked at the calendar, then looked at Ray. Going to have to start saying no. Ray smiled. Never had that problem before. Meanwhile, at Preston Auto Group, things were beginning to fall apart. Customers started asking the same question. Where's Ray? The receptionists didn't know what to say. No longer works here. Some customers quietly picked up their keys. If Ray isn't here, take my business somewhere else. One by one, they left. Service appointments began disappearing. Customer complaints increased. Comebacks doubled. The numbers Chad loved so much started moving in the wrong direction. One Friday afternoon, Richard Hayes, a businessman involved in the brake failure, walked back into the dealership. He wasn't smiling. Reviewed the independent inspection. Chad forced a grin. Good, the report says the brake failure was caused by rushed installation. Smile disappeared from Chad's face. Richard slowly placed the report on the desk. My lawyer believes someone covered this up. Intend to find out who. The first time in months, Chad felt fear, real fear. That same evening, Ray stood in his garage, looking at 6 classic cars waiting for restoration. He had never seen so much work in his life. Diane quietly walked beside him. Remember the night you said maybe Chad was right? Ray nodded. She smiled. He didn't fire a replaceable mechanic. Fired the best craftsman he ever had. Ray looked around the garage. For the first time since losing his job, he believed her. What neither of them knew was that one phone call from one satisfied collector was about to turn their tiny family garage into one of the most respected restoration businesses in the entire country. The company began to collapse 1 year later. The small garage behind Ray's house was no longer quiet. The sound of grinders, air compressors, and classic V8 engines filled the building from sunrise until late at night. Ray had hired his first employee, then a second. Every customer came for one reason: trust. People weren't buying restored cars, they were buying Ray's name. Appointments were now booked more than a year in advance. Collectors traveled from different states just to meet the man everyone was talking about across town. Things looked very different. Preston Auto Group's parking lot was almost empty. The waiting room that had once been full of customers now sat nearly silent. Another technician walked into Chad Preston's office. I'm giving my notice. Chad didn't even look up. Where are you going? Carter Motors. They offered me more money. Chad laughed. So you're leaving for a bigger paycheck? The technician shook his head. No, I'm leaving because they respect their employees. He placed his company keys on the desk. And because they don't blame innocent people for other people's mistakes. Door closed. Chad stared at the keys. That was the 7th experienced technician to leave in less than 18 months later that week. A monthly financial report arrived. Revenue, down 31%. Customer complaints, up 46%. Warranty repairs, the highest in company history. Chad slammed the report onto his desk. This makes no sense. His accountant quietly answered, it actually does. What? We stopped losing customers. The day Ray was fired, Chad's face darkened. Start that again. I'm just reading the numbers. The customers trusted him. They trusted the people he trained. After he left, they stopped trusting us. That evening, Gary Preston slowly walked into his son's office. The retired owner looked older than ever. He picked up the financial report, then looked directly at Chad. I built this business over 40 years. It survived recessions. It survived supply shortages. Survived financial crises. It may not survive you. The words hit harder than any insult. Chad stood up. So you think this is my fault? Gary answered without raising his voice. I think. You stopped listening to the people who actually knew how to do the work. Silence. Then Gary asked one question. Mechanic you fired. Coleman. Are you absolutely certain he deserved it? For the first time, Chad couldn't answer immediately because somewhere deep inside, he already knew the truth. But admitting it would destroy everything he had built his career on. At that exact moment, less than 20 miles away, Ray signed the paperwork for a brand new restoration facility. It was 5 times larger than his old garage. He smiled as he held the keys. He had no idea that before another year passed, he would receive an offer no one could have imagined. The mysterious buyer 2 years later. Ray Coleman stood inside the new headquarters of Coleman Restoration Works. The old garage behind his house had become something much bigger. 6 master technicians, a waiting list stretching nearly 18 months. Collectors flew in from across the country. Every completed restoration sold before it was even finished. Ray had stopped chasing customers. Now, customers chased him one afternoon. Diane walked into his office holding a newspaper. She placed it on his desk. The headline caught his attention immediately. Preston Auto Group considers selling after record losses. Ray stared at the article. He didn't say a word. Diane quietly sat across from him. What are you thinking? He smiled. Nothing, she laughed. Known you for 32 years. Again, looked back at the newspaper. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted the truth. Before Diane could answer, Ray's phone rang. Mr. Coleman, this is David Morgan. I'm a commercial business broker. I represent a company that's looking for a qualified buyer. Ray frowned. Not interested. Think you should hear the name first. Remained silent. Preston Auto Group. Room became completely still. Several seconds passed. Neither Ray nor Diane spoke. Finally, Ray asked, why are you calling me? Because your name was recommended by 3 different investors. They all said the same thing. If anyone can save Preston Auto Group, it's Ray Coleman. Ray slowly stood up and walked toward the window, outside. His employees were laughing while restoring a classic Mustang. He had already built everything he once dreamed about. Why would he ever go back that evening? Ray and Diane sat on the back porch. Neither of them touched their coffee. I don't want revenge, Ray finally said. Diane nodded. I know. I don't even know if I want the business. She smiled. Then don't buy it for the past. Only buy it if you believe you can build a better future. Looked at her. Those words stayed with him all night. 1 week later, David Morgan called again. Arranged a confidential meeting. Your identity will remain secret. Neither Gary Preston nor Chad Preston will know who the buyer is. Closed his eyes. After a long silence, he answered. Up the meeting. Across town, Chad Preston walked into the boardroom. His father was already waiting. Gary slowly pushed a folder across the table. We have one serious buyer. Chad opened it. The buyer's name had been removed. Only one sentence remained. Identity confidential until final signing. Chad leaned back in his chair and smiled. Whoever they are, they have no idea what they're buying. He couldn't have been more wrong. Because the mysterious buyer already knew every corner of that building. Every service bay, every mistake, and every lie better than anyone else. The man in the boardroom was silent for the first time in years. Chad Preston wasn't in control. The directors sat around the long table waiting. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the conference room doors opened. David Morgan entered first. Behind him, a man in a dark suit walked calmly into the room. Chad glanced up, then froze. No, couldn't be Ray Coleman, the mechanic he had humiliated, the man he had fired in front of everyone, the man he believed had disappeared forever. Ray looked exactly the same. Only one thing had changed this time. He wasn't wearing a mechanic's uniform. He was wearing the confidence of a man who no longer needed anyone's approval. David Morgan broke the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the lead investor, the prospective new owner, Mr. Ray Coleman. The room erupted in whispers. Gary Preston slowly lowered his head. He already understood. Chad stood up so quickly his chair slammed into the wall. This is a joke. David calmly slid a thick folder across the table. It isn't. Financing has been approved. The investors have signed. Legal review is complete. If today's agreement is accepted, Mr. Coleman becomes the majority owner of Preston Auto Group. Chad stared at Ray. You planned this. Shook his head. No. You planned this. You fired the people who cared. You ignored your customers. You blamed innocent employees. You destroyed the company. I simply built another one. Silence. No one could argue with him. The numbers proved everything. David opened another folder. There is one condition. Everyone looked at him. Mr. Coleman has agreed to keep every honest employee. Will protect their pensions. Will not close any service centers. Will also increase wages for technicians. Several employees sitting at the back of the room looked at each other in disbelief. Ray wasn't buying the company. To take revenge, he was buying it. Save the people Chad had nearly destroyed. Gary slowly stood, his voice trembled. Owe you an apology. Ray looked at the elderly man. You gave me my first opportunity many years ago. You believed in my work. My problem was never with you. Gary nodded, then turned toward his son. Without saying a word, he walked out of the boardroom. Chad tried one final time. You think they'll respect you because you're rich now? Ray smiled quietly. No, I think they'll respect me. Because I never forgot what it felt like to stand where they stand. At that moment, every employee in the room realized something. The mechanic they had watched repair cars for 15 years was about to become their new boss, and Chad Preston had just become an employee of the man he once called replaceable. Justice at last. The first morning under Ray Coleman's leadership, something unusual happened. Every employee arrived early, not because they were afraid, because they were curious. Would anything really? Exactly 8:00 a.m. Ray walked into the main service bay. He wasn't wearing an expensive designer suit. He was wearing blue mechanic's coveralls, the same kind he had worn for decades. The employees looked at one another. One technician whispered, "He's actually going to work with us." Ray climbed onto a small platform. I didn't buy this company because I needed another business. I bought it because this place deserved a second chance. He paused. And so do the people who never stopped doing the right thing. Room fell silent. Today forward, no employee will ever be punished for refusing to cut corners. If a repair takes longer to keep a customer safe, take the extra time. Fix cars. More importantly, protect families. Many of the older mechanics lowered their heads. Some quietly wiped away tears. It was the first time in years. Someone had reminded them why they became mechanics later that afternoon. Ray asked Carl Bennett to come into his office. Carl looked terrified. Know why I'm here? Ray nodded. So do I. Carl's hands shook. I'm the one who made the brake installation mistake. I was scared. When Mr. Preston blamed you, stayed quiet. Sorry. Several seconds. Ray said nothing, then he stood up. Kyle, mistake doesn't define a person. Hiding the truth does. Kyle nodded, unable to speak. Already spoken with the investigators. I told them everything. Ray smiled gently. Then today, you finally became the mechanic I always believed you could be. Kyle burst into tears. Thank you, giving me another chance. The following week, the investigation officially ended. The electronic records had been altered, security logs, computer access, and witness statements all pointed to one conclusion. Ray Coleman had been framed. Every accusation against him was withdrawn. His professional reputation was fully restored. The news spread quickly. Customers returned. Former employees asked if they could come back. The company that had nearly collapsed was alive again. One quiet evening, Ray walked alone through the empty workshop. He stopped beside the very service bay where Chad had once humiliated him. He rested his hand on the workbench. For a moment, he remembered every insult, every sleepless night, every rejection. Then he smiled, not because he had won, but because he had refused to become bitter. Behind him, Yang quietly appeared. Ready to go home? Ray nodded. Yes. He looked around the workshop. You know, this place finally feels like it belongs to the people who built it. Ray turned off the lights together. They walked out of the building, not as victims, not as enemies, but as proof that integrity may lose for a season. Yet in the end, integrity always finds its way home.